Civilization or Barbarism? An Authentic Anthropology by Dr. Cheikh and Diop. What is interesting to note is that this single feature in common with the AMP states, it seems, was enough to make revolution impossible. It must be pointed out that even in the cities of the northern Mediterranean, which had already had their revolutions and known republican regimes, the republican spirit faded away without coming back during all of antiquity. Alexander's empire was ephemeral, but its Roman replica, inaugurated by Caesar, lasted 500 years. The Roman Empire was built on ruins of the republic founded 500 years earlier, after the partial unification of the Italian peninsula. Brutus, the last defender of the republic, died tragically at Epirus by throwing himself on his sword planted in the ground, an act of despair, confirming the failure of a noble and just cause. Before him, the slave revolt led by Spartacus had already failed because the territorial context had changed with the conquest of the other Italian cities. Caesar, at 33, painfully noted that at his age, Alexander the Great had already conquered the world, thereby showing that Alexander was his favorite hero, as he himself would be to Charlemagne, who tried in vain to rebuild the Holy Roman Empire. The great dream of Napoleon Bonaparte was also to repeat the examples of Alexander and Caesar. It is therefore evident that the Egyptian model of the state, which had fascinated Alexander, survived through all these attempts. In order to get back to antiquity, let us make an important observation. In Alexander's empire, especially in the northern Mediterranean and in the Roman Empire in particular, the fundamental contradiction of A&P societies was completely developed. The land was an absolutely alienable good, and its private ownership was a tangible fact on which the empire itself was founded. On the other hand, Roman society was a slaveholding one in the strict sense. Rome, for 500 years, remained the citadel of slavery. Therefore, all the conditions required by classical theory were effectively met, including those concerning commerce and urban life. And yet, the revolution would never take place. A more precisely, at all attempts from then on would be defeated after the territorial unification, as in the other AMP societies. It will fall every time due to complexity of the new state machinery and the vast expanse of the territory, which compounded the possibilities of reaction by those in power. It would take 500 years before this regime corroded on the inside by social injustice, collapse not due to a revolution, but as the result of an almost mechanical external cause, the barbarian invasions. The accidental survival of the Eastern Empire of the Byzantine shows that the fate of Rome might have been different. The emperor of the East had the good sense to influence the path of the barbarians by negotiating with them to move on and settle further away. In modern times, one might say the same about the regime of Francisco Franco in Spain that lasted 40 years, and that of Antonio Salazar in Portugal. The fall of Salazar's replacement, Martello Catiano, in 1974 was a direct consequence of the colonial war. It was therefore an outside cause and not an internal development. This manner of presenting the facts is all the more valid in that the Spanish regime, which decolonized in time, not only maintains itself, but is quietly proceeding toward the restoration of the monarchy. If a revolution that was ripe in 1936 was postponed more than 40 years for all the known reasons, one must admit that it failed, at least in its initial phase. However, the Spanish example is not obvious, for the failure of the revolution was due to the intervention of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and the hands off policy of the French socialists. Even the Soviet Socialist Revolution of 1917 was furthered by outside circumstances. The weakening of the Tsarist Russia following its participation in World War I. We may equally note the failure of the revolution in Germany and the crushing of the progressive movements in that country after the armistice of 1918 and under Hitler. Similarly, the extension of socialism to the eastern countries and the formation of popular democracies were not the result of an internal maturation of the revolutionary conditions and action by the masses, but the result of World War II and a courageous and voluntary act by Stalin. The division of Germany into two parts forcibly toppled the Prussian stronghold overnight into the socialist camp, providing the most amazing case of the exportation of revolution. Contrary to theory, revolution was exported under our very eyes. As of the 35 years ago, to half of the most conservative and warlike nations of Europe, while the other half remains in capitalist camp. It is not by the chance that revolution at the end of the Middle Ages and at the beginning of modern times began on a religious level, with the Protestant Reformation in Germany following the invention of the printing press and the translation of the Bible into the vernacular, particularly into German by Luther. And we'll stop there, continue back off the civilization on barbarism. I'm Uriel Riley. Hi, sir.